Welcome to the Improviding Life podcast, where we explore how life can be more livable. This is Loyola, your host, and as we continue our How Human Design Helps Me Human series, we're now going to be diving into the topic of regulation, like self-regulating, supporting other people as they're navigating what they need to regulate, and playing with this ideas. What if it's not like a you issue? What if it's all of the things that are happening around and to you? And then your relationship with whether you're in response to that or whether you are in like a reaction or really like a relationship mode with life as it's lifing. And how are we going to have this inquiry? We're going to look at our undefined and open centers in human design. So if you're looking at a human design chart, if you have a center that is white, it is going to be undefined or open. If it's undefined, there's going to be some of the gates, so the smaller numbers within each center activated, which means that they'll be red or black. But the overall center will remain white. And if a center is completely open, none of the numbered gates will be encircled or like colored red or black. It will be a completely white symbol that's showing that center. And so, as always, right now, I'm going to be speaking from my experience with my chart because that's what I can speak to the most. And I would absolutely love if anyone, if you are listening and want to reach out and ask questions, I can totally then, share an answer to that question. You can also share what insights you're then seeing within your own chart as you're reflecting. And so Buzzsprout, where I host this podcast, now has a feature where you can send in a text. And really that just means that you can, go to the link in the show notes and just submit a question, a thought, a response. And then that gives me a way to actually respond in another episode to you. So that being said, let's get into my chart. So as I've shared previously, I am a mental projector. And in my particular case, that means I have head and ajna defined. Some mental projectors will have their throat defined, but that's not me. So that means I have 7 of the 9 centers as undefined or open. And then getting even more specific, I have 4 undefined centers and 3 fully open centers, which is not common. And yet I have 3 of them. And so we'll get to that point, and that those are areas where I have continued to really need to lean in to understanding when things are coming up in my body and how I can regulate and support myself through them. So I'm going to go sort of from the top of my openness in my chart down to the bottom. And so with my throat is undefined. I do have, I believe, 5 of the gates active though. So I do have this consistent sort of pulsing in my throat energy of how I want to share, calling me, ooh, is there something to say, right? But I don't have it defined, so I don't have consistent access to the energy to be able to share out and sustain it. So what that can feel like in my experience, before I was aware of this, people would often call me a chatty Cathy. But now I understand it's because I had so much head and ajna energy, right? So much pressure, because the head is a pressure center. And I didn't have the definition to be able to express or externalize it consistently without then knowing that that's something I needed to do, is to literally talk it out, open it up, let those sort of floodgates of energy come out. And so one of the ways that I notice regulation and supporting myself comes up with my throat center in particular is when I feel like I need to get the last word, right? I'm also like a Virgo, Sun, Aries, Moon, Scorpio rising, right? Like my alter ego, I call her Petty Miss Prime. So sometimes it's just, I want to get the last word because I factually know I'm right? So acknowledging that and also putting those instances aside, I'm realizing that I'm suddenly trying to get the last word or I just want to be heard, and it's about something where the topic or the outcome doesn't actually really mean that much to me in the grand scheme of things, that is a helpful indicator for me that I need some regulation, right? And what that might look like, a way that I'm supporting myself and regulating my nervous system and my energy there, is then seeing is this moment expending more energy that I'm going to get back in like return from it, right? So am I like depleting myself more than I'm being like nourished in this moment? And so something I might do is pause the interaction right there. If I'm speaking with someone, like leave that moment, wrap things up, so to speak, and then open up my handy phone and Voxer and voice note myself. I can also then notice like, okay, that usually then means I have some tenderness or dryness or hoarseness in my throat. So I might go get an herbal cough drop, which I found is really helpful for me to like just, a sensory issue that really bothers me is just how dry my throat can get in general, especially during my allergy flare-up seasons. So like that is a way that I care for myself and my energies, having cough drops, the herbal ones around. Another thing, might be like getting something. My husband laughs how much I always say this word viscousy to drink, right? I might want something viscous, so I might make a oat milk chai latte, or make tea with honey. Just something that, again, is attending to my throat itself. And often once I attend to the physical feelings that I'm feeling, then I'm able to better contextualize the situation I was navigating, or just the other pressure that I'm feeling from life or myself, or really, acknowledging, able to see how someone who was using their words in a way that was harmful, and, that I still affirm and stand by my choice to, speak up against that, and also acknowledge that I do need to have the practice of, to what extent am I then going to be putting my energy out there, and again, having that discernment, practicing and learning that discernment of, some people have already decided that they will not change their mind, and if I'm not being paid to convince someone, then I'm sure as shit need to stop doing it for free, right? Because that is just very depleting to me. So from my throat, I can move down to my identity center. So my identity center, I have one gate active, so it's undefined. As a center, I have gate 1, which is self-expression. So much of my life has been like having to be a chameleon, not by choice, and embracing the fact that with an undefined identity center, I can embrace and have all these different versions of myself, but from this place of what version of me is needed in this moment to be useful, so that way I have a sense of belonging and I'm, allowed to be in the group, and or what is the safest way to be right now. So as I'm noticing that those tendencies are coming up, and if I'm really taking things that aren't about me really personally, then one of the ways that I'm practicing regulating and supporting myself through that is to ask myself that question. Is this personal to me? Is this about or challenging my self-expression or my sense of self, because someone has directly said Lori, you blah, 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 right? Or is it something where someone is just speaking about something in general, and then my brain and my safety sort of mechanisms are stepping in saying, well, that has to be about me, right? Because in the second scenario, it very well could be about me. But again, if I'm being more depleted than I am nourished from the moment by putting the words, whether said or unsaid, in their mouth and making it about me, that lets me know, oh, okay, I am feeling that energy sort of ricochet off of my defined gate of self-expression, and there can be this sense of well, and you add in my ADHD and demand avoidance, I don't want to be perceived as who I'm not, and also how easily I can wrap myself up unintentionally in this identity or direction in life as, of being in response mode of, well, if you think this, then I'm going to prove to you that. And again, this is sort of jumping into the heart center, which we'll get to, or really looking at the direction of life that I'm feeling has so often been, about, again, keeping up with what version of myself feels like the safest one to be. And so my main sort of regulation practice right now, other than asking myself, is this actually about me or for me or not, is finding these moments, and they become joy practices of what it feels like to express myself, right? So the other day I made a silly TikTok. I was taking out the recycling, and there's a box of Doritos, the jarred drinks, deliciousness. My husband and just finished a sort of 12-pack sampler, and my period was like, oh, what's the worst and most incorrect way that I could pronounce Doritos, and in the worst accent that I could do, even though I'm not great at accents. And so suddenly this like attempting to be Southern accent came through, and I did this whole like video or little skit on Jaratus. And like, I just need to have a Jaratu. I have been thinking about this mango Jaratu all day, and there's just something about quenching your thirst, and I don't mean your mouth thirst, but your soul thirst, and only a mango Jaratu can do that right now, right? So calling them Jaratus was like this whole play, right? And so I just would say, like, giving myself these minutes to dabble and delight, and like that's how I want to express myself right then. I want to be playful, I want to be quirky. I've also been going through this sort of like style and fashion evolution of realizing that, again, so much of my relationship with clothes was like, oh, well, I have to just find something that fits my larger body, not actually understanding that, oh, certain cuts not only like feel better, but they help me feel and look the way that like I feel on the inside, like have that be external as well. And also like certain color, all the colors that I owned and like were washing me out, not actually brightening up my face. And so just like these moments of saying, oh, you know what, instead of going into like reaction and sort of muscle memory mode and putting on my usual mom fit that I've been wearing the past 3 years, I can actually swap out this shirt for this other one. And then also like, I don't have to only wear these bike shorts. I also have these new linen pants that feel really good and serve the same purpose, i.e. they have pockets and they're comfortable and I can wear them all day, right? But in those moments, that's a way that I'm regulating my sort of like fight, flight, and freeze tendencies of being in reaction to things in life happening, and then asking like, what is a way that I can enjoy and express myself right now? So then getting over to my heart center, or sometimes called ego heart, that this center I have fully open. So it's one of my 3 fully open centers. And so I find it very helpful in a moment of needing regulation or to ask myself, what is worth anyways? So like the heart center has to do with like worth, value, like will. It's also called the will center, and asking like, what even is worth, and like, do I even have to get wrapped up in this idea of if I'm worthy, if something else is worthy, and that's sort of part of the intellectual like entry point, the on-ramp for me to have access to regulating myself when my sense of worth and coming to peace with the fact that I'm not here to make promises, like when those are feeling triggered or coming up. Another practice that I have for regulating that is, I'm still really working through this one, is realizing when I've made a promise, even though like my brain gets really crafty and be like, I didn't realize I was making a promise, right? And choosing to have the difficult conversation of saying, I actually need to clarify this or change boundaries or, back out of something and just say like, this actually isn't for me, and like have those conversations. And also like I grew up in a home with a deal of hoarding, right? So I wasn't really allowed to have items, use them, move them, I couldn't really interact with my environment, yet there was just so much environment happening. And so another thing that's been helpful with regulation is, as I'm navigating, like, how do I keep a home now, even though I didn't really have the training of how to like maintain a house and items. That means I also don't know how to get rid of things. Like, it's not a muscle that I've developed. And so reminding myself that like items are not correlated with my value, my worth, and that I don't have this obligation, this lifelong loyalty to something. If it's causing more overwhelm than simplicity or support or ease, then it's not for me right now. And then what are the options, right? Donate, sell. And if it's something where its utility or lifespan is past, then having to get rid of it fully. And another practice too now of like realizing that the language of being a Care Bear has been there for me for literally since childhood. My one friend would always call me a Care Bear, and realize like, oh wait, that actually is, with that fully open heart, part of my like gifts and abilities in this lifetime is to literally be able to have this heart-based energy and healing and a way to hold space for people. So I literally do Care Bear heartbeat out to people. And I had this beautiful reading with someone recently. They did a reading for me. I'm in a Akashic record clearing and just all these things. And one of the things that came through when we were debriefing, sort of talking through it afterwards, is like, oh, that heart beam can actually go inward towards myself, right? It's not just about sharing my love outwardly, but how can that go back towards me? So this will be a new way that I'm supporting myself and regulating, is practicing that Care Bear heart beam back towards myself. All right, so next in our centers, we can then go to our sacral. So I have a defined sacral, or none, that's not true, an undefined sacral, but with three of the gates defined. And what that means is, like, there are some flavors of having present creative life force energy, and then there's certain facets of like, oh, okay, in certain conditions I can be in like do mode, right? But I'm not here to be energizer bunnying out and doing all the things like a generator would, right? I don't have that defined. And so with that undefined sacral, trying to be the battery, and really, this comes from a place of survival mode over the course of my lifetime. It's one of the ways that burnout just continues to happen. And so I have to very actively remind myself and practice finding those joy moments, those practice, doing something that's not work related or like client catch up related or like adulting related, right? Like ensuring that I have any access to time and practice and space that feels like has nothing to do with a to-do list and everything to do with a to-be list, right? So activities that I enjoy, like trying to find more time for reading and off of a screen, all right? More time outside, more time playing with my food and really making things that give me this like lusciousness feeling in my body. And also, knowing that when I'm feeling like I'm really like sort of on the fritz and like a battery that's just like absolutely drained or overwhelmed and just like ramped up too much, then, showers are so helpful for resetting my energy and my nervous system. So like, again, that idea of how am I regulating and supporting myself, when I'm feeling like the sort of nuclear reactor that's about to go, a shower or a bath can help so much. And also finding that playful creativity time where I'm just singing and dancing with my toddler and we're just being silly and, like back to that idea of creating that silly Jar2's video, right? Where like we're just playing in the spirit of play. And how, like, again, the idea of, is this moment depleting me more than it's nourishing me? And there's a different sort of satiation like level that comes through when I'm thinking about my undefined sacral, because it has that sort of pleasure base and that life force creation energy, because that is what sacral energy represents and is. So now we will go to our solar plexus, which is my second fully open center. And so with that being fully open, again, I'm the loudest Bluetooth speaker imaginable for anyone who has defined emotional, a defined sacral or emotional centers having emotional waves, which means that I can feel their emotions more potently, it seems, than they feel their own at first, unless they are aware of their, human design or in tune with their body. And over a lifetime of not knowing that that's what was happening, I was really labeled and experienced myself as being overly emotional, right? And I think this then sort of can ping pong off of that identity center of like, I everything being personal, right? But it's because I can feel emotions that are also underneath what someone is like saying, and like sort of how all of that can get sort of confuzzled and become personal about me. So one of the ways I'm currently practicing self-regulation, especially as a parent to a toddler, and a toddler who has the 7 centers that I have open and undefined are the centers that she has defined. We're like puzzle pieces in that way. So realizing that when I'm feeling her emotional waves start, I all of a sudden feel, whoosh, so then I can feel out of control. All of a sudden, like, oh gosh, what's happening? And if I don't catch it in time to pause, how quickly I go into reaction mode, and then I have to walk myself back. And then also realizing the way that that also can start to feel like it's prompting or triggering my undefined or my fully open heart, or that will center, because, she also has that defined. So then those two fully open centers are then suddenly have this, I can feel this very sort of like rug pulled out of me. Oh gosh, how did I get to this like an energy intensity level so quickly? So, a practice for regulating that I'm trying to incorporate, this very moment, is realizing it's like, oh, when I slip into feeling like I'm in control mode, is it actually me amplifying her emotional wave? Is it actually then me feeling her will energy saying, I don't have the will for this moment, I don't want this is not feeling like what I want to do? And then the loudness of how I feel it in my body almost being like I'm, like a blaring speaker where I'm like, oh, covering my ears and I'm losing sight for what the actual like music is, so to speak. And being able to check in with myself that way. Another thing is like having those challenging conversations, embracing emotional moments, like seeking them out actually, right? So it's like, if I feel like, because then I guess with it being fully open, I don't have any energy there consistent, like unless there's something in the transits or I'm near somebody to flush out the gunk that happens in my solar plexus and in my emotions. So then, is that like listening to a certain song that I know will give me an emotional experience? Do I put on the ASPCA commercial so I can cry? Right? Do I go ahead and watch some Abbott Elementary or Schitt's Creek or Pen 15, so I can laugh? Right? And like just allowing the things that, quote, people say are not very good, like watching stuff and being in media, on media platforms and stuff, like understanding that for me, part of regulation can be seeking out those things, but then also that I can have a tendency to then get hooked on and want more of that emotionality because it feels like I'm supposed to be busy with emotions, just because, again, that survival mechanism of that there was so much emotionality that I was encountering from my caregivers and, my household growing up. And so also then needing to better understand when it's time to have full space and actually be processing emotions and not just taking things in to flush them out, but then have that sense-making time that can come through. So now then we go to my third fully open center, which is my spleen. Spleen is another awareness center. And the spleen's role is to really keep you alive. It's the first energy center that formed in terms of having, this like instinctual, is this for me or against me type of energy. And so again, with that fully open, not only am I amplifying splenic energy around me, but I really have been asking myself how fear has been like veiled to me over time, and not realizing that a lot of my hesitancy in making decisions or navigating certain aspects of adulting actually do have an associated like fear, but realizing like, oh, it doesn't actually feel like it's my fear, because again, I have that center fully open. It's been one that's been handed to me, whether that's ancestrally and it's still just in my, energy and passed on, whether it's in my family of origin that got, taught to me and I picked up, whether it's just a societal fear, like actually asking. So like how with the heart center, I said, I ask what's worth anyways, asking like, what am I afraid of and whose fear is it actually, has been helpful for me to start regulating myself, because I should have had I get $1 from the universe every time I say regulating in this episode, but how can I take better care of myself by realizing that if I'm feeling fear, that fear was handed to me in some way or some place, that it's not an innate fear that has to be in my system, right? There's other ways that I can be processing that. And so another, the spleen is also really related to health. And so I've been having some chronic, really challenging health things happen for the past 7 months. And I'm at a point now where I'm starting to feel some of the physical relief and alleviation from some of the compounding issues. So I have more energy capacity to be to do and to be outside of only in survival mode. And so I'm feeling right now most drawn to reconnecting back with my spleen, because that was the first center that when I first learned about human design, or really even before that understood energy work was a thing, my spleen started to give me information, because again, it was like, okay, you're reconnecting with your body and we want you to be surviving. And that's what came through first. So I'm realizing now, even as this is like a whole soundboarding episode for me to really talk things out and see my own experience reflected back at me, I'm seeing how my spleen and, my body's been doing the very best it can as I'm now just navigating major shifts and decisions and needing to take better care of myself in life. And that also means I can reconnect with my splenic energy, and that other ways of supporting myself will be coming through as I reconnect and I'm able to lean in. And lastly, in our energy centers, if I included everyone, I don't have this written down to make sure I'm counting all 7. So after I share out about the root center, I will do a brief pause to make sure that I went through them all. And so root center. So I have an undefined root, but I have, I believe, 6 of the 9 gates active. So I do have a considerable amount of root energy there for it to not be defined. And so the root is really about knowing when it's enough is enough. Having the sort of sense and place of time, and the cadence of things, of again this pressure center that can really force into doing mode. And so I often I've realized in my reflections that so much of life I felt like I spend trying to find where I am in a moment, and then I'm so exhausted figuring out where I even am or what task I was going to do, that then my energy spent, so I don't then quote stay on task or feel like I'm building towards something over time. And in those moments in particular, I'm finding that it can be so helpful to ask myself, am I actually done with this moment again? Am I over it? Am I just still holding on to it because it's familiar for me to hold on to things, out of how I've learned to navigate life? Am I operating from this place of feeling like it's not safe to belong? Does it feel unsafe to have roots, right? So, a more tangible way that caring for myself through my root center can look is literally making sure my phone is put down and charging in a different room that I'm not at, so I don't feel the tendency to then do something and get busy. Finding a blanket or heavier material clothing, so I physically feel a little more weighted into my body, that I'm more in a cocoon mode, has been really helpful for me. And so also notice when I have too many things scheduled in one day, and especially if those days are back to back, because that can be a helpful indicator for me that, again, I'm trying to go through a to-do list that's really filled with life's task, or someone else's idea of what busyness level I should have, when really having the space to observe and notice where I feel like I belong, and where I'm rooted into, where I'm feeling like I have a sturdy foundation from which I can then take action, and know when I've, sort of done enough in that moment and can find pause. All of that is far more regulating for my nervous system than to feel like I'm always on. So if I realize that I always feel on and I'm trying to find the next thing I'm supposed to do, that is a really helpful indicator for me to see what options I have access to that don't feel like there's any set outcome or productivity or expectation associated. It's just actually being in the moment and experiencing the said activity is the whole point. That has been really supportive for me. And really, with the example of reading, I as a child, I read 2 or 3 books a day. I just read every single moment of my life. So fast forward to now where, since I've become a parent, haven't really been able to read paper, actual books, because, my baby loves eating paper and writing and all them and all these things. So, and retraining myself that, reading one page a week can still be this luxurious thing that I'm allowing myself to do. It is not about, the objective of reading doesn't have to be to read a whole chapter or finish a whole book, even though that was so much of my experience of myself growing up. And so, tending to my root center and that pressure living in is it's totally okay to have 2% relief or 2%, enjoyment in something, or in my time. I don't have to look for something that totally shifts the whole paradigm of my life, and that allows me then to find those moments where, I understand enough is enough. I understand where I'm pushing and forcing, and I can really settle back in. So let's recap together. I spoke about my throat. I spoke about my identity center and my heart and my spleen and solar plexus and my sacral and my root. So that is all 7. So we made it through. This episode's a little longer than I thought it would, but thank you for being here. All in all, I wanted to share this out too, because, 2 episodes ago I was talking about our definition and how that's what we can give, that's sort of the dishes that we're bringing to the potluck and what we're here to share out. And then it just felt right to explore then if we're taking in from our openness and our undefined and open centers, that, back to that question that I sort of started the episode with of, is what I'm experiencing actually myself, or is it all the things that can happen in life and in relationships and all around me, right? And again, that's not to say don't be accountable for yourself and your actions. This is not what I'm saying. No, we absolutely need to be practicing being accountable and repairing relationships. What I am saying is that the better equipped we are to understand how we're experiencing our openness and our undefined and open centers, then we can sort of clear out the noise of the generic sort of self-help, regulate yourself things as take a deep breath, right? Which may not be something that resonates with your personal capacity, experience, or interest or patience level or any of the things, right? And that our openness can actually be an on-ramp for us to see what practices are actually helping us, giving us the ability to see ourselves in a different way and to know how to better ask for and receive support. So, that being said, as always, have a razzle-dazzle day. And if that's not accessible, you can put an F on front and have a frazzle-dazzle day.